Greetings, Mayhemers. So tonight we're going to take a look at one of hopefully many to come head games. Now these head games segments are going to be a little different than our other ones. They can get a little dark. There may be some triggers, and may not be for the faint of heart or unsound of mind. Or maybe they are. But I'm going to tell you that what they are is basically, thought experiments or philosophical problems that we've either addressed or that we've invented as a group, specifically just for the sake of doing it. So if you're the kind of person that kind of likes to go down the rabbit hole and take a little bit of a challenge, then this is definitely probably the right segment for you. If you're prone to anxiety or stress and have trouble regulating emotions, then you may not want to watch this particular episode. So I'm going to leave that up to you, my very capable and dear audience. But today's Mayhem head game is going to be centered around the idea that everything in the universe, everything about human life, from the point in time of a baby's first cry, is nothing more than a giant long con of the universe. So without further ado, let's take a look at the Grift.
Oh shit. Hold on, there you are. Yeah, so I mean this all basically started with everything is a grift. Everything is a grift. There is no part of life that isn't a grift.
Sorry, the wifey was walked by. I was nodding.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, fucking it's late. But yeah, like everything is a grift, and it's virtually impossible to escape. Like, how do you escape the grift? Everything from the day you're fucking born is a grift. You know, we talked about
babies first cry.
But yeah, when babies cry for attention, that's a grift because they get something out of it. Such a dark conversation.
We're going to go pretty dark tonight. So
yeah,
you think about that as sort of being like the biological basis of survival. Is that sort of like induction of guilt to get what you want or what you need? It sets a pretty dark backdrop for where we're going to go.
But I mean, that's the precedent that's set. You know, so how do you escape that? How do you escape the grift in any way, shape, or form? I mean, we don't really have a choice. We have to be a part of the grift. We're biologically driven to be a part of the grift since the day we're born. You know, babies don't cry for attention because they're trying to manipulate people. You know, babies cry because they're trying to survive, and they know that if they do that, they have a better chance at, surviving.
Yeah, at not being dead, right?
They're not actively taking a part in the grift. They're just a part of it de facto because that's what you're born into.
It's like the most basic unit of grift. It's the molecule of grift.
Yeah. That's the DNA of grift is just crying for attention, but it's a thing, and that's why, like, when we talk about the grift, it's not that the grift is inherently evil or bad. It's just it's the thing. It's what it is. It's virtually inescapable. And
what part of life is not transactional, right? Like, you think about any interaction that you have with even the closest people in your life. If the other person's not getting something out of it, they're not going to keep interacting with you. They're not going to keep having sex with you. They're not going to keep, claiming your name as a part of their life. They're not going to do anything. Everything has a cost, right? And that's kind of the basis of it, except the thing that makes it a grift, I think, is the way that we have to hustle and grind and this and that or whatever in life, right? Like, I mean, everything is a long con. Everything is there's a long game. that everyone's playing, whether they're conscious of it or not. Is that what we're getting at?
Yeah, I think so. Like the long game is honestly, like as far as human beings go, is just, I mean, probably, I would guess, just, not dying alone.
Yeah.
So we play whatever game we can throughout the years to get us to that point with, varying levels of success, and it all turns into that personal grift where it all comes down to, like, what do we want at the end of the day? How do we get it? And there's levels to the grift. There's people who live a grifty life who are just shitty fucking people, straight up, and they don't care about anybody else. And we have clinical terms for people like that, like sociopath and psychopath.
Right. Yeah. I mean,
they are easily defined.
What about the noble grift?
The noble grift, right? Is there a noble grift? Like, does such a thing exist?
Well, I mean, think about it. You think about it. We do know people who are, in some sense or another, striving for nobility, or striving for some sense of well-being and happiness, or greater and deeper meaning. But I mean, they're still going and grinding and transacting just like all the rest of us, right? I mean, and it's just another way that the grift is dressed.
Yeah, and that's the thing, right? Like, it's all because it's all a grift. It's just varying degrees of grifting, and we're all grifting each other. Such a dark conversation. So fucking depressing. But, like, we all do that every single day. Every interaction we have with another human being, like you said, it's a transaction. It's not an interaction. It's a transaction.
I mean, think about how many times in your life can you just ask for something and just plain get it? Because that would be probably the ungriftiest thing I could think of.
To ask, like, I mean, that, like, that's, to me, that's a homeless person on the streets. They're just asking for something, and you give it to them.
Right.
That's the most ungriftiest thing, which is funny because homeless people are often looked at as grifters, but they're not. They're just straight up asking for something. There's not a transaction there. There's not a give and take. It's just a give.
Who's really grifting there? The guy who's just asking for some change, or the person who gives that change to sort of support their own sort of like insecure and self-righteous sense of morality? I mean, I think one person's actually getting more than 50 cents worth out of that transaction.
Possibly, yeah. Yeah.
That's that noble grift.
Is it noble? Who's, like, and that's the thing. It's like very subjective topic about, like,
my tongue tucked deeply into my cheek when I say it that way. So, like, so I mean, one thing that you mentioned during our sort of like pre-conversation was everybody's at the top of their own scheme, but we live in a world that's a network of billions of schemes.
Yeah. It's because everything is a grift and everybody is grifting everybody else. I mean, if you're not at the top of your own grift, holy shit, man, you got to get your shit together. But there's your grift, and then there's everybody else's grift, and there's no top to the pyramid, but there are not very many tops to the pyramids. There's few grips, and there's definitely people at the very top, and we're all kind of grifting each other. It doesn't matter. Like, it's not just money. Like, I think when people think of the word grift, they just think about, like, oh, somebody's trying to fuck me out of my money. But it's like, it's not about money. There's emotional grifts. There's, physical grifts. Just there's a million ways.
Right. I mean, you can get fucked out of minutes of your day.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a chunk of your life. Everything is transactional. It's all a grift. The idea
is probably the worst one because that's the one you can't get back.
Right, and the biggest time grift I can think of in light of our conversation is what you call the last honorable man.
Yeah, like does that person exist? Does the last honorable person exist? Someone who exists outside of the grift.
And so, like, yeah, when we had this conversation earlier, my thought was, a monk or a hermit or whatever, but you were able to definitely poke some quick holes in those examples. And so, one thing we didn't really get to was how do you get out of the grift and how do you become that last honorable person? Because I think we've all tried, right? We've all tried at some point to be the last honorable person, but what we found was that there's an unfortunate dark side to that.
Yeah, I mean, like, is it possible? I think that's the first hurdle to cross is, like, is it actually possible to remove yourself from the grift completely and entirely? I don't know that it is.
And when you do, you're forgotten.
You disappear immediately.
Mm-hmm.
Because you're not a part of the natural order anymore, because once you remove if everything is a grift and you remove yourself from it, you cease to exist.
Well, right. I mean, why would it be worth remembering something that isn't part of the grift?
But is it not worth how do you remember somebody? It's so complicated, but, like, how do you remember someone who should never have existed in the first place?
I mean, that's a good question. I mean,
themselves from the reality of life.
It's like Bigfoot or a unicorn.
Yeah, it's like, is it a myth? Is it possible?
How would we know if anybody ever even achieved it or hit that threshold or made that transition of leaving the grift and being the last honorable person?
Has anyone done it?
We wouldn't know. We're still in the grift.
That's the fucking problem with it, is that if anybody ever does it, we'll never know.
Right. They could be trying to talk to us and we wouldn't even hear it, right? I mean, because it would factor so far outside of our natural wiring that it wouldn't even register.
Like, even the conversation we're having right now, like, if the last honorable person was a third party in this conversation, what would they tell us? Really, what would they say to us?
I have no idea. I can't even fathom that.
Right? Because not only if the last honorable person was a part of this conversation, they would know that you and I are part of the grift, but to try and remove us from the grift would enter them into the grift, because they would then be trying to change us and change our path, and they would be trying to change us as people, and that's not what the last honorable person would do. The last honorable person would never do that.
Work together. Does the grift itself function as a singular organism, as opposed to, are you just interfering with that person's personal grift and getting a reaction by trying to, or would that last honorable person be provoking the grift itself?
I think the reason the last honorable person can't be a part of this conversation is because the only possible reason for them to be a part of this conversation would be to remove you or I from the grift.
Mm-hmm.
But to remove us from the grift is to become a part of the grift.
Because they'd have to grift us out.
Then they have a vested interest in our future, and that then turns them into a part of the grift. So they can't be. They can't be a part of the grift. Which is why this person, even if they exist, we may never meet them. Or we may have met them a million times. We'll just never fucking know.
Or they don't exist.
Or they don't exist. It could be an impossibility. It's hard to say.
So it's an interesting thought. So going further into the grift here, even if, let's say, that last honorable person, due to their status as the last honorable person, could enter the grift and simultaneously be immune to it, how do they engage in extracting a human from the grift without engaging in grifting?
I think they would just get fucked over.
Right.
Right? Like I don't honestly see the last honorable person immersing themselves into the grift without just getting completely fucked over and ignored.
How does the last honorable person get a cheeseburger? Right? Like how do they buy toilet paper?
I don't know.
Yeah, no, I mean,
the last honorable person has never had a cheeseburger and will never have a cheeseburger.
So I'm getting an echo at this point.
Let me turn this down a little bit. Does that help?
Yeah, I think so. It might have just been my mic overloading a little bit. So I mean, in terms of this grift, you told me in your life that you've tried to be that last honorable person.
Yeah, I would like to try. Like I think a part of being the last honorable person, and I'm definitely not because we're having this conversation, so that's possible. We've already established that. But
since you mentioned this, I thought like, wow, like every bit of like going to work, every bit of like going to the store, every bit of like sliding through Facebook or any of this stuff ultimately engages the grift. It's part of the grift. Like,
yeah,
no matter how hard or how much you want to be that last honorable person, it's almost like a fable. It's something that's very, very hard to enter into, and the reward for it is non-existence by default.
That's the thing, is like, yeah, and I think that was one of the good points we kind of approached when we were talking about it, is that there is no reward for being the last honorable person. You know, there is no, there's no real reason to do it.
Yeah, there's no,
you know what I mean? Like there's not a reason to be the last honorable person. There's no reason to escape the grift, because the grift is life, and there's not any real point in doing it because no one's going to remember anyway.
Right. No, it's kind of it's kind of like unjacking from the Matrix, right? Like, I mean, unless 5 people were to simultaneously somehow ungrift at the same time, well, then they would automatically start having transactions.
Yeah, they would create a new grift.
Yeah. And then the real question is,
son of a bitch.
The nature of grifting is sort of predatory. So if the much bigger, more established grift sees this little baby grift encroaching on its territory, it's probably naturally just going to absorb it or eat it.
Yeah, and that kind of goes back to, so like what you're saying is, like, if 5 people detach themselves from the grift miraculously somehow and just remove themselves from it, well, that's 5 people. So that's 5 new pyramids. That's 5 new people who need to be at the top of their pyramid. And the grift just starts itself over again. And there's always somebody at the bottom, and there's always somebody at the top. And it's just impossible to escape. Like, there's no it's the way it's just the way everything works, and that last honorable person exists in, like you said, like a mythical space. It's not. Is it impossible for them to exist? I don't know. Is it possible? I don't know.
Yeah,
what would that person look like? What would that person behave like? You know, like you talked about monks. Close. You're getting close, but still not quite.
Right, because I think what you said, there's still some sort of a transaction that has to happen in order for them to be able to make any kind of a sacrifice in the first place. Not only that, in order to that sacrifice to be validated, it has to be acknowledged by a monastic order or another human being. I mean, there is a level of some sort of a grift transaction there. It's a sort of like projected identity or end result that isn't intrinsically or inherently there, but is suggested by the sort of ritualistic or repetitive behavior of the person grifting, right? I mean,
yeah.
You know, I go out and I grift every day. I mean, and I really never thought about it until today. It's like
it's kind of shitty to think about, like
it's the way I think I use the long con of the universe, and like part of me wants to title this the long con of the universe because I don't know, this rolls off the tongue. But
it kind of is. It's like, you know, and like even talking about monks, like who made that motherfucker a monk? Right? Somebody had to give him that title.
Another
some
other monkey. Yeah, some other monkey.
Yes, I am a monk. Somebody would have to be like, oh yeah, that guy's a monk. I gave him that title
because maybe the state monk
committee. You know, I'm the only person, because I'm at the top of the pyramid, I'm the only person who can give that guy or gal the title of monk. Because, you know, when I'm at the top of the pyramid, and I'm the motherfucker running this very specific particular grift.
Right. This is my grift TM. When I think of the great social media platform. When I think of this conversation, something that popped into my head was several conversations that I've had with people who are really deep conspiracy theorists, and I always tell them the same thing. I'm like, I don't know whether what you're saying is true or not, but it sounds like you're giving people too much credit. You know, that's really when I get to hear these big giant international banking conspiracies or all of this stuff. I'm like, sure, yeah, there's some there. But I think that rather than it being sort of like very long, historical, drawn out, great plot to end or enslave humanity, I really just think of it as a bunch of people who most likely fall in Aiki Ranger between like 100 and 180. They're, you know, somewhere above average that have old money that are just engaging in short-sighted grifting with a lot heavier resources, a much bigger artillery, but it's still the same exact thing. It's still, ooh, look shiny. I'm only going to live for 75 years, so let's take all that shiny stuff, put it under our grifty little flag, right? I mean...
Yeah, for sure. I mean, honestly, like, modern medicine has been great because it's made grifting a lot less violent.
Right.
You know, because people live longer now, and we don't just have to straight up murder people anymore, which is nice. You know, I think that's a nice thing. But it hasn't really changed the nature of grifting very much. It's all still the same thing. It's all still still helping.
Two or more people are trying to take from each other. Which one is taking the most? Right? Because I think both are taking something. It's like breaking a wishbone, but with a little bit of intention behind it.
Yep. Yeah. It's breaking a wishbone, but you get a little pissed off if you don't get the bigger half.
Mm-hmm.
And you're trying to get the bigger half.
And then when you come back with a different level and hope to break the bigger half.
Yeah. So, like, when we talk about the last honorable person, I mean, it's pretty subjective, but I think we could both agree. There's degrees of honorability, you know, like we would like to be the last honorable person, even if it's impossible. But we also live in a world where, you know, a lot of people, they don't give a shit about that. They don't really think about honor or respectability or anything like that. And
well, I think a lot of people do think about that, but it's a dress. It's a clothing for something that's different. It's part of a grift in and of itself. Because I think, like, you know, if somebody watches this discussion and it gets past the use of the word grift a million times, they're going to eventually start to parse out what we're saying. And I think what they're going to think about, if they're up on evolutionary biology, they're going to think of like altruism in primates. They're going to think of, you know, graciousness and compassion between human beings. And I think in the human being part of it, it's going to be pretty easy for us to refute that both humans are getting something out of it, even if it's a little rush of oxytocin or, you know, something by being compassionate to another person, right?
for
But
sure,
there's a way with humans, there's a way that can be argued into grifting, right? I mean, we can find a way to say that's part
it's
of
a
a hustle.
transaction. Like you said at the very beginning of the conversation, everything is a transaction, right? Like that little bit of oxytocin that you get, that's part of the transaction. That's part of the deal.
Okay.
You know, maybe you get a little oxytocin and food to eat for a day as a part of your grift. Maybe
Eventually, you get a little
maybe
a
all you
little
get
bit
is
of
the
meaning.
oxytocin.
Right. So when we have meaning making and we're making meaning, you know, how does that factor into the grift? Like when people are making nice feelings and meanings out of their experiences, is that a way to keep the grift quiet? Because grifting is by nature stealthy and deceptive.
It is, even though it's kind of like right in our faces all the time.
Right.
It's a thing that nobody wants to talk about. You know, there's nobody, like you can ask anybody you know, whether the nicest person you know or the least nice person you know, nobody's going to be like, yeah, I'm a grifter. I
Right.
grift everybody all day, every day. Even though that's what we all do, nobody is ever going to openly say every action I take every single day is a transaction to benefit myself in some way.
Right.
That's a hard thing to just come out of your mouth, but I mean that's basically what we're all doing every day. We're all just
and we go to work, we do all of the things that we do, hoping to get more worth than the energy that we put into doing it. That's the idea.
yeah.
Right. Whether that's in layers of meaning, self-worth, currency in and of itself, bravado, status, acknowledgement. I mean, I can think of a lot of layers that, you know, I'm probably not even touching on half of it. Individual motives that speak to that idea that you're trying to be the person breaking off the bigger half of the wishbone. And how do you do that in an honest way?
I don't know. I don't know how you do it. You know, and that's the basis of our entire conversation. Is like, how do you, how close can you get? You know, we talked about in our creativity conversation, how close can you get to perfection? Is the last honorable person a perfect human being?
Well, that's I have no way of evaluating that.
Or are they just an idiot who doesn't understand how the universe works?
I guess it depends on whether you're asking the person, society, or the universe itself.
I mean, on one hand, yeah, I would definitely call that person an idiot. They seem pretty naive. The last honorable person seems pretty fucking naive to me. I mean, this is the way everything works around you, and yet why would you continue to defy that and not work within the bounds of everything that's been set out around you? Why would you defy that? Or
I mean,
is the reason
maybe
you
this
do that because you
harmful
feel
person.
intrinsically the way things are set up is wrong?
That could be a thing. It could also be that the person just doesn't perceive the grift. Perhaps they perceive the underlying order of the universe to be beautiful, righteous, and truthful. And I guess, in a sense, to be that last honorable person, you'd have to see it that way. You'd have to believe that the universe itself is being honest with you. And I don't think that that's definitely not from my seat. That's not what I'm feeling, right? Neither are you. That's why we're talking. So when I think about this concept of this long con of the universe and everything being a grift and all interactions being transactional, it's hard to sort that out, what honor even means at that point. And I mean, you know me well enough to know that I tend to be pretty relativistic in a lot of ways. And the things that may outrage me in one period of my life history may not in another, or in one situation and not another. And I think that's maybe because I'm feeling the pulse of this grift. And sometimes, the sob story doesn't ring true, and sometimes it does. Sometimes the mitigating circumstances don't add up, and then sometimes there's an awful lot that isn't discussed. And I think it depends on who's doing the grifting, right?
Yeah. No, and I think like there's there's definitely certain points in your life where like your own personal grift ain't going so good, and you don't have time for somebody else's grift. And you as much as it sucks to say it, you got to work on your own grift a little bit. Like you have to like you can call that self-care or taking care of your own shit, but all you're really doing is just fucking looking after your own grift a little bit because you've neglected it to the point where you're suffering because you haven't taken care of it. And
let's see, what would Peterson say? Like something about sorting your room into a hierarchy of buckos or some shit, right? Like I don't know.
Monsters. That's
his grift. But apparently it's a $50,000 a month fucking grift. So
yeah, and I mean, like, and that's the thing is like, there's very obvious grifts, and Jordan Peterson is a very obvious grift. It's super fucking obvious. He is really fucking cashing in on that one, and he's not the only person out there doing it, but
no, no, he's pretty slick though. I mean, damn.
He is. Yeah, I guess he is. Like, I mean, I look at a person like that, and I'm just like, I don't know. Like, what do you say? Like, do you get mad at the person grifting other people, or do you get mad at the people falling for the grift?
B for me, usually.
Like there's so many people that just fall for it all the time, and it's like, Jesus fucking Christ, are you kidding me? If I didn't, it's kind of like I remember, like back in the old days, the big grift was religion, and you had the pastors with their giant fucking churches and stuff like that, and like you didn't really feel like they were hurting anybody with their super obvious grift.
Right.
Recently, I find people are in danger. People like Jordan Peterson put people in danger with their super obvious grift. And that's what I find lamentable is, I don't understand how this person became a professor. I don't understand how this person gets paid to do fucking anything. But, somebody last year in Toronto drove a van down a crowded street and murdered people because something Jordan Peterson. And to me, that is that's super lamentable. That's the grift taken to a point where when it becomes a danger to other people's lives, that's
we're going back in time, like you said in the beginning of our conversation. We've gotten to a point with technology and society where grifting doesn't have to cause death as much, or we don't have to individually murder another person to extract any kind of wealth or currency from them. Like, basically, even though it sounds like we're having a super antisocial conversation here, what we're really getting at is that everybody's in the grift. If you're getting grifted, then you're in the grift and you're trying to grift your way through the grift. Like, there's not really some high road or some golden bridge that you can step on that puts you above the grift, that walks you to some, special fucking palace at the end of life. The simple fact
is, and that's the thing, is
do the same exact thing, right?
I think a lot of people, and I think a lot of people are like, you can't grift your way out of the grift. Like, it's diminishing returns, right? Like, you're not, if you're starting here, you can't grift your way up the grift. You're here. That's your spot. And the only place you can go from there is down here and try to grift the people underneath you.
Well, you can grift yourself. I think that happens too.
What's that, sorry?
I said I think you can grift yourself. I think that happens too.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. A lot of people grift themselves. And it's fucking hilarious when they do it. But Baked Alaska, one of my favorite grifters of all time.
Explain. Explain that.
So Baked Alaska, just some idiot. Got YouTube famous, got grift famous, social media grift famous, and just tanked himself, because he thought he was above. He thought he was at the top of the grift, but he wasn't. He was very low on the grift, and then just disappeared into fucking obscurity. Milo is another person like that who grifted himself into obscurity and just disappeared.
So you can grift yourself into obscurity, or you can try to be the last honorable person and go to oblivion. So it seems like there's sort of like two ugly roads out there. And I just can't help but wonder, are those both self-grifting?
It's absolutely possible.
Okay.
Maybe that's the end game of the conversation we're having, where it's just like, if you are the last honorable person, you never escape the grift. You're only grifting one person.
Oh man, I like that, dude. I'm glad we turned on Skype tonight.
I haven't seen a lot of examples of the last honorable grift. Oh shit, that's got to be the title now. The last honorable grift. But I haven't seen a lot of examples of the last honorable grift of someone grifting themselves into oblivion. But
react to that, man. Oh shit! All right.
But maybe that's where it goes. Like, maybe that's why that person doesn't exist, and why we can't have that conversation with him. Is because
I think a lot of us are maintenance grifters, right? Like, we're grifting to sustain our idea of what we thought our life should be. I mean, I can definitely say that's kind of where I'm at in the grift. I'm in a maintenance grift.
Yeah, I think. I mean, when you look at your life as a whole, is that not what we're doing the whole time? Like, whatever you do every day that you think is the best thing to do for yourself, you're just maintaining your own personal grift all the time. I would like you to go over this recording after it's done and count how many fucking times we've said the word grift. But
if somebody makes a drinking game out of that, they're gonna die.
They would be dead from alcohol poisoning, straight up. We've said the word grift. We're on 40 minutes now. But really? A person like yourself, who I have a lot of respect for you, because you do hard work trying to help other people, and you care passionately about other people, and you do your work selflessly.
Yeah, but you know what? There's still a lot of grind that goes into it in the background. So, like, you know, in terms of, you know, what somebody with, you know, a profession like mine has to do to even be licensed to have their work recognized and sanctioned in the first place.
Yeah.
It's a grift. It may not be the person seeking the license's grift. They may have a different grift. It's the grift of the state.
Yeah.
No, it's the grift of 28 layers of bureaucrats in a 19th century Byzantine fucking state government operating in 21st century technology, and it's ridiculous how many people must exist in the middle management of government who get paid $60,000 to $80,000 just to invent new paperwork every year. That's a fucking grift.
I agree. But here's the thing. You can't do the job you do
without that
grift.
Right.
You know, I can't just go cook in a foreign country if I don't take part in the grift. I have to I have to get my seal and all my paperwork in order if I'm going to go cook food in another country for a company, and they know that I'm not going to poison their customers, et cetera, et cetera. You know, I knew a long time ago I wasn't going to poison anybody, but I still need that piece of paper.
So in all this, talk about the grift. Why the fuck do grifters, actual open air grifters, not get a little more respect?
Right? They're just running the normal game.
Yeah, you know? They're just functioning according to the natural order of things.
So I've always had a lot of respect for gangsters of any type. Is just like they're just making money. You know, right. They're very transparent about what they're doing. It's just like, here's the thing you want, I can provide it to you. A lot of people don't like that I'm doing it, but you seem to want it really bad, so I'm going to give it to you.
Because, I mean, isn't that a little bit more reflective of the natural order and the way we observe it? Like, I know that, you know, as human beings, being what we are, our natural tendency is to want to pull patterns and create order to elicit a sense of safety, right? Because chaos and disorder are uncomfortable.
Yeah, we hate it.
Yeah, it's terrifying.
All the time.
It's terrifying. But when you see that sort of chaotic behavior and realize that it exactly matches the order that you receive, how do you reconcile that? Without grifting, you don't. It's a grift.
It's not possible.
Right.
So, you know, maybe we can look back at this conversation in a month or two and figure out a different word.
Maybe.
Can you think of a different word though? Like besides grift? It's a
no. Once you introduced it to my head, it's stuck. And no, it's definitely the grift.
Sense. You know, I was sitting at Spider's house, and you know, I got a lot of shit going on, and I was just like, fuck, everything's a grift. Everything. Nothing. I can't think of a single fucking circumstance where it's not a grift. Somehow, in some way.
There's always one person that's receiving more than another. I'm trying to think, like, maybe we can come back to this, but I'm trying to think of a perfectly mutual transaction, and I'm just having trouble coming to that. And it's even because I don't think a grift, well, because is an unconscious grift still a grift?
Yeah, it's still a grift. I mean, it's just the way things are, and that's what I mean. Is like that's why I'm saying like a grift isn't necessarily like there's grifting and then there's fucking grifting. Like if you're a dickhead and you're gonna take advantage of somebody as a grifter, for sure, that's awful, and you probably shouldn't do that. But there's also just the everyday grift of your life where it's just like, yeah, everything's a fucking grift, and that's how you get by. and that's how
Right.
you live for another day. And it doesn't necessarily make it a bad thing. That kind of grifting isn't bad. I'm not saying it's good either. It's just what it is. It's part of your life, and it's what we all do to survive day to day.
I can think of some parallels now that we're talking about it. So, like, when I'm thinking about, why are some grifts acceptable and others not acceptable, the only thing I can come back to is sort of like culture or morality that is what's propping up certain grifts over other grifts. Because think about sort of like the long con of Christianity, for instance, right? We go way back in time, and a lot of people, were at the very least grifted out of the span of their years on Earth, right? If they lost nothing else to it, they lost that. We have still to this day zero reason to believe that any of that is true. It's an ongoing grift right now.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
But it's propped up by culture. It's accepted, right? There's definitely
it's a powerful grift.
Mm-hmm.
It's a grift with some weight behind it.
Well,
because it has psychological weight behind it. Like it has the most powerful psychological weight behind it, which is guilt.
Guilt and fear of death.
There's not much more powerful grift than fucking guilt. I mean, if you can make somebody feel guilty, you can grift them out of fucking anything. Anything right. For you if they feel guilty.
When I think about, though, the powerful grifts in life, so you have, we'll go back to sort of like the Abrahamic religions. One of their biggest interesting grifts is the ability to out-grift or sanction against other grifters. Sanctioning becomes a part of the grift. Like it's a bureaucratic grift. Yeah. I don't know exactly how to sort that out, but
that's kind of what you were talking about, where it's just like early when we were talking about how everybody has their own personal grift. Somebody was just like, yeah, but I have a better idea. What if we grift other people's grifts?
Right.
And that's kind of where it all started. And the Abrahamic religions were really fucking good at out grifting other grifts. Like they were just like, oh shit, like that's not a bad grift. I like that. Let's absorb that grift into our own grift and make it even better. We're going to add some guilt onto that, some fucking sexism, some misogyny, and let's add pedophilia into there too. We don't care.
Aftermarket accessories to a fucking giant grift.
Yeah.
It's like a grift with spinners.
Yeah, if you could think of the biggest grift mobile in the world, it would probably be like the Pope mobile. It's the biggest grift mobile going.
So I mean, when our spiritual friends yell at us for having this conversation, because I have a feeling I'm eventually
should.
Huh?
Should.
Yeah.
There's only two of us talking right now. They should yell at us. Just like.
It wouldn't have happened if the rest of y'all were in here to balance us out, right? I mean, no. Instead, you leave Cory and I up to our own devices, and this is.
Look what happens. Look what happens. Can't even release this before Christmas. You can't release. It's so dark.
It is.
Everything is a grift. Like I think about like people. I think about like people like Taryn. Who's like, and yourself as well, like who, and True as well. It's like, like people who like, they've sacrificed a lot to help other people. Fuck, it's got to be hard to hear that it was all a grift the whole time.
No, I actually am pretty vocal about. I don't say the grift until today, right? I didn't think of it. I didn't conceptualize it as the grift, but I mean, I've been. Sort of screaming into the void about some of the systemic issues surrounding the helping professions for quite a while, and because we have to give everything we've got to our clients in that moment.
Yep.
And it's become completely normalized for us to be miserable because we're perceived to be honorable. It's become normalized for us to be paid low amounts of money and accept it because they know we're helpers. And they know we're going to help because we're helpers.
Yeah.
Right? That's a grift.
Bullshit.
It's a grift.
Yeah.
You know?
You are getting grifted.
Yeah.
Right now.
Yeah.
However much money you're making, however much money Taryn is making, however much money True is making right now, it's not enough. It's not even fucking close. I'm a fucking cook and I don't make enough money. My grift right now is not successful enough.
No, I feel that. I feel
somebody
that.
else is reaping too much of the benefits, and I am not reaping enough. I cannot even begin to fathom what you're taking home at the end of the day, because regardless of the money that you take home at the end of the day for doing the work that you do, it's selfless work. The baggage that you have to take with you every day when you go to sleep at night, how do you compensate people for that monetarily? You can't, and that's the thing where
That's just it.
Honorable person.
I mean,
you're gonna have honorable person. How would you compensate the last honorable person? How much money do you think they should make? Do they need any money at all?
I don't know. We're talking about unicorns here, man.
Yeah.
Like, because I can tell you that there are things in my life that have become nice and secure, right? But with all of those things comes a lot more expended effort, because sometimes you have to appease the grift of another to get your own grift going, right? Like, you have to lock one thing down to make space to do another thing. But the thing that boggles my mind is when somebody has a great grift, when somebody has a grift that is just showering them in wealth and attention and all of that, like, seriously, it's obviously not a matter of intelligence, because I see people on TV, on Facebook, on social media, grifting their way all the way up to the fucking top, and they're complete goddamn morons, and then they fuck it up in like a few years, and they take a damn nosedive, and it's like, that seemed like a pretty surefire grift there. Like, what happened? Like, why?
How did you screw that up there, genius?
Right.
What happened?
Of course.
What happened? Alaska? How was that your name, by the way?
Right now, we could be grifting ourselves into oblivion by having this conversation.
Yeah, for sure. But no, I don't. I think a lot of people are probably like, we're almost at an hour now. Like, they're
gonna get 5 minutes in, and they're gonna be like, "What?
What the fuck are these guys talking about?"
They're gonna go to like 45 minutes into the video, and they're gonna still hear everything is a grift.
Grift. Everything's a grift. Grift.
There's going to be a lot of people that are going to have to Google the word in the first place.
Yeah. Grift. What does that mean? Oh.
It's the long.
Actually, I kind of feel bad for even bringing this up today. Like, you and I were chatting earlier, and I kind of like before I even turned the Skype call on, I was just like, shit, what have I done? What have I done?
I was laying down and like, wow, Cory's still going, because your responses like weren't back to back when we were messaging earlier. It was like, I was drifting off into a little bit of Star Trek or whatever the hell was going on around me. All of a sudden I'd hear a bing. There's Cory, and he's like, yep, there's the next layer of the grift. I'm like, oh shit. Yeah, so we're sitting here now, and we decided to get on this Skype call and have this very long circular conversation about the grift.
Yeah.
And I would really love for someone to show me how it's not, because it's a weird philosophical head game we're playing right now, and it's a bit of a trap, because once you sprung it on me, I'm sitting here thinking about it, and the only way to get out of it is to ignore it and default back to concepts of nobility or concepts of self-righteousness. But I don't know that I can go back. I don't know that. I mean, I can.
Yeah.
But how do I forget this?
Yeah, and that's the problem. Is it's like, it's kind of that like Pandora's box of like, shit, fuck. Wish I hadn't opened that fucking thing.
Yeah,
why did I have to think about that? Son of a bitch! I thought about it. Now I can't unthink about it.
Person probably for the next 5 or 6 months at least, because I don't just let problems like this go overnight, you know. Like, and be sort of analyzing layers of grifts and trying to justify one grift over another, and not realizing I'm running a background grift just to accomplish that task. You know, it kind of almost regresses infinitely. It's like,
well, I apologize. I apologize.
no, I love it. It's been
how did this conversation start? I can't even remember how this conversation started.
I don't know, but it's been a long time since I've been able to wrap my head around something new. I mean, when I'm reading, you know, research materials for whatever reason, or having conversations, I mean, everybody's having the same 10 conversations on the internet right now, right? Like, and it's the same 5 news stories. It's the same, like, I mean, really, everything's distilling down into like 4 or 5 branded performances that everybody is capitulating to and engaging in, not realizing that their own grift is nothing but a reflection of a much larger grift. And the person who's actually doing the grifting is the one that's making the money off of those interactions.
Yeah.
Good or bad, doesn't matter.
No, it doesn't matter whether it's good or bad. It's just a thing that's happening.
Yeah, it's yeah.
You know, like, fuck it. Like, if we get anything out of this conversation, it's like the word grift doesn't have to be a bad thing. It's just a term that describes what we're doing. You know, there's not always ill intent behind it. You know, it's just
no. I mean, you don't maliciously think about the person you're breaking the wishbone with. You're just hoping for your own luck.
Yeah. And a lot of times you're kind of hoping for their luck too.
Maybe. But you're hoping more for yours, right?
Of course.
You may love that person. You may love that person deeply.
If you lose on the wishbone, there's always next year.
There's always next year, and that's when we're going to publish this video.
Fucking snap that motherfucker again.
Or
next year.
You do it at midnight, January 1st.
Yeah. We, like, human beings, love that shit. We love milestones, and like the reason the wishbone is, if we did the wishbone thing 4 times a year, it would not be consequential at all. Nobody would give a fuck about it. One time, you get 1 shot every fucking year, and you only get so many years on this goddamn planet, so you know, gotta win it one of these times. New Year's is the exact same thing. It's a completely inconsequential day, but fuck, for us it's important because it's another shot. It's another kick at the can every time.
It makes me wonder. So, like, when we have that feeling that when we break that wishbone off, fortune is smiling upon me. Is that a temporary moment of the feeling it would be to exist outside of the grift for just that split second? And then back in the grift. Well, for a minute, you were lucky for just that one quick second. You had that bigger piece of the.
Not even a fucking minute, just like a fucking microsecond. Just a microsecond. You existed outside of everything.
For that one.
And you got nothing from it.
Moment.
Right?
No.
You know, breaking off that larger piece of the wishbone didn't get you anything.
No,
but it got you somehow everything. Just for a millisecond, it got you everything.
I think
that's when you are the last honorable person. You fucking snap it off just for a millisecond. It's not something you can keep or hold on to, but just for a fucking microsecond, you had it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a great place to park this one, dude.
All right.
Yeah.
I'm gonna turn this fucking recording off right now.